The night was quiet on that lonely stretch of highway until the patrol car's lights flashed in Marcus Webb's rearview mirror. He checked his speed, 5 under the limit. His taillight, working perfectly. Registration and license, up to date. Still, his heart sank as he pulled over. Marcus took a deep breath, remembering his training. Stay calm. Follow protocol. He placed his hands on the steering wheel, where they could be seen clearly. 2 officers approached, flashlights aimed directly at his eyes. The taller one, his nameplate reading Brenner, tapped on the window with unnecessary force. License and registration, he demanded, not bothering with pleasantries. Marcus nodded. Officer, I'm going to reach for my wallet in my back pocket and my registration in the glove compartment. The second officer, Lewis, already had his hand on his holster. Just do it slowly. Marcus carefully retrieved his documents and handed them over. Officer Brenner examined them with exaggerated scrutiny, shining his flashlight across every detail. Step out of the vehicle, Brenner ordered suddenly. May I ask why, sir? I don't believe I violated any traffic laws. Lewis's face hardened. He said, get out of the car. Now. Marcus complied, stepping onto the asphalt with measured movements. The cool night air carried the scent of pine from the forest lining the highway. In the distance, crickets chirped, oblivious to the tension unfolding on the roadside. Turn around, hands behind your back, Brenner commanded. Officer, I don't understand. Lewis grabbed Marcus's shoulder, spinning him roughly against the car. You don't need to understand. You just need to do what you're told. Marcus felt the cold metal of handcuffs click around his wrists. His mind raced through protocols, contingency plans, extraction scenarios. 7 years as an undercover agent for CELR had prepared him for many situations, but this wasn't in the handbook. We got a call about a suspicious vehicle matching this description, Brenner said, beginning to search through Marcus's car without permission. Someone carrying contraband. That's impossible, Marcus replied evenly. I'm just driving back from a conference. You can check my... The back of Lewis's hand connected with Marcus's mouth, splitting his lip. The metallic taste of blood filled his mouth. You'll speak when spoken to, Lewis growled. Marcus watched in horror as Brenner pulled a small bag from under the passenger seat, a bag Marcus had never seen before. Well, what do we have here? Brenner held up the bag triumphantly. Looks like our caller was right. That's not mine, Marcus stated firmly. Someone must have planted it. Both officers laughed. They all say that, Lewis commented, shoving Marcus away from the car and toward the patrol vehicle. Marcus's mind worked frantically. The real danger wasn't a trumped-up drug charge. It was what lay hidden in his glove compartment. The communicator, a piece of technology entrusted to him by the Arcturian High Council, was scheduled to transmit updated human social development metrics in less than 10 minutes. If it was discovered, Earth's application to the Galactic Alliance would be instantly rejected. Listen, Marcus attempted. This is a misunderstanding. If you call this number, my supervisor will explain. Your kind always has excuses, Brenner interrupted, returning to the car with something new in his hand. A large metal canister. Marcus's blood went cold. What are you doing? Lewis pushed him to his knees on the rough asphalt. Teaching a lesson. Brenner unscrewed the cap on the canister, and the unmistakable smell of gasoline filled the air. With deliberate slowness, he began pouring it over the hood of Marcus's car. Stop. Marcus struggled against the handcuffs. You can't do this. Looks like I am, Brenner replied calmly, continuing to douse the vehicle. Lewis leaned down, his face inches from Marcus. Should have stayed in your lane, boy. Marcus watched in disbelief as Brenner completed his circuit around the car, emptying the last of the gasoline on the trunk, before tossing the empty can aside. The officer pulled out a lighter, flicking it open with a practiced motion. This is illegal, Marcus stated, trying to keep his voice steady. This is assault and destruction of property. You're officers of the law. "We are the law out here," Brenner replied, his face illuminated by the small flame. With a casual flick, he tossed the lighter onto the hood. The gasoline ignited instantly, flames racing across the surface of the car. Within seconds, the entire vehicle was engulfed, heat billowing toward them in waves. Marcus felt a drop of blood from his split lip fall onto the dusty road as he stared in horror. Inside the burning car, unnoticed by anyone but Marcus, a small blue light began to pulse rhythmically within the glove compartment. The communicator was activating early, triggered by the extreme heat. On Marcus's wrist, hidden beneath his sleeve, a small implant displayed a countdown, 30 seconds until full activation. "You have no idea what you've done," Marcus whispered, watching the numbers tick down. The officers were too busy admiring their handiwork to notice the subtle changes in the fire's color. Flickers of blue and green dancing among the orange flames. They didn't notice when the burning car's radio suddenly switched on, playing static at an increasing volume. 20 seconds. Marcus closed his eyes briefly, calculating his options. If the communicator transmitted under these circumstances, with its guardian being assaulted by Earth's own law enforcement, the Council would have all the evidence they needed to quarantine the planet for another century. 15 seconds. The flames grew higher, now tinted with an unmistakable blue glow. Officer Lewis finally noticed, his self-satisfied smirk faltering. "What the hell is that?" he asked, pointing at the strange fire. 10 seconds. "Brenner, something's wrong with that fire," Lewis called out, taking a step back. 5 seconds. The night sky suddenly lit up as a blinding white light descended from above, bathing the scene in harsh brilliance. The sound of powerful engines filled the air as winds began whipping dust and debris around them. Both officers looked up in shock as a sleek, unmarked helicopter appeared, hovering directly above them. More lights switched on from the aircraft, pinning the officers in place like insects under observation. 0. The communicator activated fully, sending a burst of energy that shattered the car's windows and sent a pillar of blue light shooting straight upward into the night sky, connecting with the helicopter above. Marcus knew that everything had changed. Earth's future now hung in the balance. The helicopter's downdraft flattened the tall grass in perfect circles as its landing skids touched the ground. The powerful spotlights continued to illuminate the scene. The burning car, the handcuffed man on his knees, and the two police officers who now shielded their eyes against the blinding light. The side door of the helicopter slid open. A tall woman in a charcoal suit stepped out, her silver hair pulled back in a tight bun. She walked with purpose, flanked by 4 individuals dressed in black tactical gear, their faces expressionless. "Agent Webb, status report." Director Calloway's voice boomed across the field, cutting through the noise of the helicopter's engines and the crackling flames. The cops froze, confusion spreading across their faces. Officer Lewis's hand instinctively moved toward his sidearm, but he stopped when one of the tactical team members fixed him with a warning stare. "Director," Marcus nodded, remaining kneeling, still handcuffed. Blood had dried on his chin from his split lip. "We have a code indigo." The communicator was in the vehicle. The effect of his words was immediate. Calloway's face drained of color. She snapped her fingers, and the team in dark uniforms rushed forward. A woman with close-cropped hair quickly freed Marcus from its handcuffs, while others aimed strange devices at the burning car. These devices looked almost like weapons but emitted no visible beams or projectiles. "What the hell is going on?" Officer Brenner demanded, hand now resting on his gun. His earlier confidence had evaporated, replaced by growing alarm. Calloway ignored him completely, helping Marcus to his feet. Her eyes scanned him quickly, assessing his injuries. "Are you all right?" "I'll live," Marcus replied, rubbing his wrists where the handcuffs had cut into his skin. "The Council was monitoring your feed," Calloway said quietly. "They saw everything." Marcus closed his eyes briefly. "All of it. From the moment you were pulled over. The transmission was triggered early by the fire. Officer Lewis took a step forward. "I don't know who you people are, but this man was in possession of illegal substances. We were conducting a lawful..." Silence. Calloway didn't even look at him. She spoke into a small device on her wrist. "Security perimeter established. Good. Prepare for possible atmospheric disturbance." The team working on the burning car had somehow suppressed much of the flames, though the vehicle was clearly beyond saving. One of them approached Calloway. "Director, we've stabilized the communicator, but it's been damaged. The transmission was incomplete. Can we retrieve it?" she asked. "Yes, ma'am, but it won't be functional." Calloway nodded grimly. "Get it secured. Priority Alpha containment protocols." Throughout this exchange, the two police officers stood watching, their confusion giving way to unease. Officer Brenner's hand still hovered near his weapon. "These officers don't know what I am," Marcus said quietly to Calloway, glancing toward the cops. "Well, they're about to find out," Calloway replied, turning to face the officers for the first time. Her expression was cold and focused. "Gentlemen, you just assaulted the most important man on the planet." Brenner laughed nervously. "Lady, I don't know what kind of game you're playing, but..." "This is no game, Officer Brenner," Calloway interrupted, and the officer's laughter died in his throat. He hadn't told her his name. "What you've witnessed here tonight is classified under National Security Directive 1954 Omega. You are now officially in custody of Stellar." "Stellar," Lewis repeated. "Never heard of it." "That's rather the point," Marcus said, accepting a clean cloth from one of the team members to wipe the blood from his face. Calloway gestured toward the sky. "In approximately 45 seconds, you'll understand the gravity of your actions tonight." As if on cue, the clouds above them began to glow with a soft purple light. The air pressure changed suddenly, making their ears pop. A low humming sound vibrated through the ground beneath their feet. "What is that?" Brenner asked, all pretense of authority now gone from his voice. The tech team had extracted a small crystalline object from the burned wreckage of the car. It pulsed with dying light as they placed it in a specialized container. "That," Marcus said, pointing to the object, was a direct communication link to the Seven Worlds Coalition, a galactic council that has been watching Earth for the past century, evaluating whether we're ready to join the interstellar community. Lewis snorted. "Aliens? You expect us to believe?" His words cut off as the purple glow in the sky intensified, and a massive shape began to materialize above them. It was difficult to comprehend at first, a geometric form that seemed to bend light around it, creating the impression of something both there and not there simultaneously. "Oh my God," Brenner whispered, his face pale in the strange light. "Not God," Calloway corrected. "Just our neighbors. And they're not happy." The shape continued to materialize, revealing what appeared to be the underside of a vessel larger than a city block. Its surface shifted and moved like liquid metal. "What happens now?" Lewis asked, his voice barely audible. Marcus turned to look at him directly. "Now you get to explain to beings who could reduce this planet to ash why you thought it was appropriate to assault their appointed liaison based on the color of his skin." One of the tactical team approached Calloway. "Director, we're receiving a communication request from the vessel." Calloway nodded. "Agent Webb, they'll want to speak with you." "And what about them?" Marcus asked, nodding toward the officers. "They're coming with us," Calloway replied. "The council will want to hear their explanation directly." "You can't do this," Brenner protested, though his voice lacked conviction. "We have rights." 7 years, Marcus said quietly. "I spent 7 years building trust with 7 different civilizations, each with the technology to either save our world or end it. I've convinced them that despite our flaws, humans are worthy of joining their alliance." He stepped closer to the officers, his eyes reflecting the purple light from above. "Tonight, you may have undone all of that work in less than 15 minutes. A beam of light shot down from the vessel, touching the ground near the helicopter. Within the beam, a platform began to materialize. "Time to go," Calloway announced. "Officers, you will accompany us without resistance. What happens next will determine not just your fate, but potentially the fate of everyone on this planet." As they walked toward the light, Officer Lewis looked at Marcus with new eyes filled with dawning horror at the realization of what they had done. "Who are you?" he asked. Marcus met his gaze steadily. "I'm the man standing between humanity and extinction, and you just made my job a lot harder." The underground Stellar facility hummed with activity. Located 300 feet beneath an unremarkable office building in Washington, D.C., the command center buzzed with technicians monitoring screens filled with data streams and satellite imagery. In the center of this controlled chaos sat a glass-walled conference room where Marcus Webb faced the 2 police officers who had assaulted him less than 12 hours ago. Officers Brenner and Lewis sat stiffly in their chairs, their expressions a mixture of disbelief and fear. The journey here had been disorienting by design. Blindfolded in the helicopter, transferred to a vehicle, then descended in an elevator that seemed to drop forever. Their weapons, badges, and phones had been confiscated. They were, effectively, isolated from the world they knew. 7 alien civilizations are deciding if Earth joins their alliance or gets quarantined forever, Marcus explained, sitting across from the stunned officers in the underground Stellar facility. His injuries had been treated, though a faint bruise still colored his jawline. On the wall behind him, a massive screen displayed a rotating holographic map of the Milky Way galaxy. 7 star systems were highlighted in different colors, with lines connecting them in a complex network. Each of these civilizations has been spacefaring for at least 10,000 years, Marcus continued, gesturing to the map. Together, they form what we call the Coalition. They control resources, technology, and knowledge that would transform life on Earth overnight. Images flickered on screens around them, beings with crystalline structures instead of flesh, massive ships that seemed to bend reality around them, worlds with multiple suns and impossible landscapes. The cops hadn't spoken since being shown the truth. Video feeds of Marcus negotiating with beings not of this world. A door slid open and a woman entered. She was tall with sharp features and moved with the precise efficiency of someone who never wasted motion. Her black uniform bore no insignia except a small silver pin shaped like a stylized star. "Agent Amara Chen," Marcus introduced her. "My partner and the Coalition's secondary contact on Earth." Chen nodded curtly at the officers before turning to Marcus. "The Arcturian representative is demanding explanations." The communicator contained footage of the entire incident. "And you too," Agent Chen added sharply, turning to face the officers. "Just showed them exactly why humans might be too dangerous to trust." Officer Lewis stared at his shaking hands. His confident demeanor from the roadside had evaporated entirely. "We didn't know. Would it have mattered?" Marcus asked quietly. The silence that followed was answer enough. Lewis looked away. Brenner studied the floor. "Let me explain what's at stake," Marcus said, pressing a button on the table. The room darkened, and a new image appeared on the screen. Earth, but somehow wrong. The continents were recognizable, but large portions appeared blackened and lifeless. "This is a projection of Earth in 50 years without Coalition assistance, climate collapse, resource wars, and technological stagnation. 8 billion lives in a slow, painful decline." The image shifted to another Earth, this one vibrant, with gleaming cities and vast green spaces that hadn't existed before. "And this is Earth with Coalition membership, clean energy, advanced medicine, food security, access to the stars." Brenner finally spoke, his voice hoarse. "If these aliens are so advanced and peaceful, why do they care what 2 cops did on a back road?" "Because they've seen this before," Chen replied. "Worlds that developed technology before they outgrew their tribal instincts. Worlds that brought their hatreds to the stars and ignited conflicts that destroyed entire systems. Marcus leaned forward. They're not judging all of humanity based on you two, but they are judging how humanity responds to what you did. So what happens now? Lewis asked. You lock us away somewhere. Make us disappear. Before Marcus could answer, an alarm suddenly blared throughout the facility. Red lights pulsed along the walls. On the main screen, a message appeared in glowing alien script, complex symbols that shifted and moved like living things. The Council demands a response. Chen translated, scanning the alien text. They want to know if humans can ever overcome their hatreds. The facility director, Calloway, entered the room, her face grim. They've moved up the timetable. The Coalition is sending a delegation to Earth in 72 hours for final evaluation. If they rule against us, Earth will be placed under quarantine. No contact, no assistance, no access to interstellar travel or trade for the next 100 years. That's not enough time, Chen protested. We need months to prepare, not days. We don't have months, Calloway replied. The incident has been classified as a first contact violation. They want to know if the officer's actions represent humanity's true nature. All eyes turned to Marcus. As Earth's primary contact with the Coalition for the past 7 years, his recommendation would carry significant weight. Marcus stood, his decision made. I'm going to show them we can change. And you two are coming with me. Us? Brenner asked incredulously. Why would you want us anywhere near these aliens after what happened? Because redemption is the most human story there is, Marcus replied. If 2 men who assaulted me out of prejudice can understand their error and grow beyond it, that's more powerful than 1,000 diplomats making empty promises. You want us to apologize to aliens? Lewis asked. I want you to represent the human capacity for change, Marcus corrected, to show them that even those who give in to their worst instincts can find their way back. Calloway looked skeptical. These men aren't trained for diplomatic contact. They could make things worse. Or they could save us all, Marcus countered. The Coalition respects authenticity above all. They'll see through any rehearsed performance. But genuine transformation, that will resonate with them. Chen studied the officers carefully. And if they refuse? We can't force them, Marcus said. This only works if they choose it freely. Lewis looked up, meeting Marcus's gaze. You'd trust us after what we did to you. Trust has to start somewhere, Marcus replied simply. The room fell silent except for the continuing alarm. The fate of humanity now rested partly in the hands of 2 men who, just hours ago, had been burning a car by the side of the road. Brenner stood up. What would we have to do? First, Marcus said, you need to understand exactly who you're meeting. The 7 representatives aren't just diplomats. They're the most powerful beings in this sector of the galaxy. He gestured to Chen, who activated a holographic display showing 7 distinct life forms. You'll need to learn their customs, their taboos, their communication styles. You'll need to speak from your heart about what you've learned. And you'll need to convince them that your experience reflects humanity's potential to grow beyond its limitations. And if we fail? Lewis asked quietly. Marcus's expression was solemn. Then our grandchildren will never see the stars. The departure from Earth happened in secrecy before dawn. A sleek shuttle, its technology far beyond anything publicly known, lifted from the STELR facility's underground hangar without making a sound. Inside sat Marcus, Agent Chen, the 2 police officers, and a small support team. As Earth's blue sphere fell away beneath them, Lewis pressed his face against the viewport, his eyes wide with childlike wonder. Brenner sat rigid in his seat, knuckles white as he gripped the armrests. First time's always rough, Chen commented, noting Brenner's discomfort. The gravitational buffer makes it feel like you're falling and rising at the same time. How long until we reach wherever we're going? Brenner asked, trying to keep his voice steady. 4 hours to the Coalition transfer station, Marcus replied. From there, we board a council vessel for the journey to Harmony Point. The journey passed in relative silence. The officers had spent the last 3 days in intensive training, learning basic protocols for 7 different species, studying coalition history, and preparing for the diplomatic summit that would decide Earth's fate. As they approached the station, both officers moved to the viewport. The structure that came into view defied easy description. It resembled a massive snowflake made of light and metal, spinning slowly against the backdrop of stars. "That's not possible," Lewis whispered. "It must be miles across." 17 miles at its widest point, Chen confirmed. Home to representatives from over 50 worlds. The officers stared in wonder as the transport ship approached the massive space station. Their shuttle was guided into a docking bay large enough to hold a naval aircraft carrier. As they disembarked, they entered a world beyond anything they had imagined. Inside, alien delegates from dozens of worlds moved through soaring halls. Beams of light floated alongside creatures that seemed to shift between solid and gas. Translucent beings with multiple limbs conversed with entities that appeared to be living crystal formations. "Stay close," Marcus instructed. "Most species here are friendly to humans, but some have different concepts of personal space or communication." As they walked through the main concourse, a floating orb approached them, pulsing with gentle blue light. It hovered before Marcus, who bowed slightly. "Greetings, Navigator Webb," a melodic voice emanated from the orb. "The Council awaits your party in the Harmony Chamber. Will these humans require atmospheric adjustments?" "Standard Earth protocols will be sufficient, thank you," Marcus replied. As the orb drifted away, Brenner leaned close to Marcus. "Why bring us?" he asked, voice barely above a whisper. "After what we did." "Because redemption is the most human story there is," Marcus replied, "and I need them to see it." Their quarters on the station were simple but comfortable. A circular room with sleeping pods and a common area where food appeared through some unseen mechanism. For the next 2 days, the officers continued their intensive preparation. Each morning began with diplomatic protocol training. Each afternoon, Marcus took them on guided tours of the station, carefully introducing them to representatives from various worlds. In the evenings, they studied the history of the coalition. For 2 weeks, the officers had trained, learned. They'd seen wonders and horrors, planets saved by the Alliance, and worlds destroyed by their own hatred. They viewed recordings of civilizations that had advanced technologically, but failed to evolve socially, worlds that had torn themselves apart through prejudice and fear. "That could be us," Lewis had said quietly after one particularly disturbing viewing session showing a world that had destroyed itself in a war based on genetic differences among its population. "It won't be," Marcus assured him. "That's why we're here." On the 3rd day, they were scheduled to observe a council session from the visitors' gallery. As they made their way through the sweeping corridors, the officers had grown somewhat accustomed to the diversity of life forms around them. They no longer stared openly at the 6-limbed Trizalians or flinched when the mist-like Vaporeans drifted past. As they approached the council chamber, they passed through a security checkpoint. A human technician in a STELR uniform was working on a control panel near the entryway. Officer Lewis stopped suddenly, pointing to the technician adjusting something on the panel. "That's wrong. The pattern doesn't match." "What?" Chen asked, turning toward him. "The uniform, the stitching pattern on the shoulder. It's different from the other STELR agents." Marcus had already taught them about stellar security protocols, including the subtle identification markers built into their uniforms that changed weekly. Lewis had noticed what the rest of them had missed. The technician's head snapped up, eyes locking with Lewis. In that instant, his hand moved toward an inside pocket. Marcus moved quickly, tackling the man as he reached for a weapon. They crashed into the control panel, sending sparks flying. The technician fought with surprising strength, landing a solid blow to Marcus's jaw. Around them, security protocols activated. Crystalline barriers materialized, sealing off the section of corridor. As they struggled, something flickered across the technician's face, a ripple like static on an old television. For a split second, his features changed, revealing another face entirely. "Hold him down," Chen shouted, pulling a small device from her belt. Brenner and Lewis moved without hesitation, each grabbing one of the attacker's arms. Chen pressed the device against the man's neck, and he went limp immediately. As the security containment field stabilized, the holographic disguise completely failed. The face that appeared was one Marcus knew well, Agent Harlan Voss, his former partner during his first years at STLR. "The saboteur," Marcus breathed, rising to his feet. "You leaked my route." Voss's eyes remained defiant despite the paralytic Chen had administered. "You're going to bring them here, aren't you? Open the doors to all of them." "He's conscious but can't move," Chen explained, scanning him with another device. "And he's carrying enough explosives to breach the council chamber's outer wall." "Why, Harlan?" Marcus asked, genuine pain in his voice. "We worked together for 3 years." "Because they'll change us," Voss spat. "Remake humanity in their image. I've seen the projections. In 100 years, we won't even be human anymore." Coalition security forces arrived, tall beings with iridescent scales and 4 arms, each carrying energy weapons. Their leader approached Marcus. "Agent Webb, this is most disturbing. An assassination attempt before the final evaluation. Not an attempt against the Council," Marcus clarified, "but against Earth's chances of membership. He targeted you specifically," Chen added, examining data from her scanner. "And these officers. His plan was to eliminate all of you before the hearing." Voss's eyes burned with hatred. "You really think these aliens care about us? They want our resources, our genetic material. They'll turn Earth into just another outpost." The security leader gestured, and 2 of his team lifted the paralyzed Voss. "We will interrogate this human and determine if others are involved." As they carried Voss away, he called back to Marcus. "They'll never accept us. Not after what your new friends did to you. I just tried to make sure we stayed free." When they were alone again, Lewis looked at Marcus with new understanding. "He's not the only one who thinks like that, is he?" "No," Marcus admitted. "There's a faction within our own government that fears coalition membership. They believe isolation is safer than integration." "And what do you believe?" Brenner asked. Marcus smiled slightly. "I believe you just saved the lives of everyone in that council chamber. And tomorrow, when they ask why humans deserve a chance, that's where we'll start." The Harmony Chamber stood as the beating heart of the massive space station. Its curved walls soared upward, culminating in a transparent dome that revealed the swirling cosmos beyond. 7 massive thrones arranged in a perfect circle dominated the center of the room, each designed to accommodate the unique physiology of its occupier. The gathered audience consisted of representatives from dozens of worlds. They sat in tiered seating that encircled the central floor where Marcus, Chen, Brenner, and Lewis now stood. The air hummed with a low frequency that seemed to make thinking clearer, speaking easier. "Humanity stands before the 7, announced a tall being composed of shifting blue light. Its voice resonated directly in the minds of all present, somehow perfectly understandable despite having no mouth. "The evaluation period has concluded. We will hear final statements before rendering judgment." Marcus stepped forward first. For 20 minutes, he spoke of Earth's progress, its struggles, and its potential. He acknowledged humanity's flaws, but highlighted its capacity for growth, its resilience, its creativity. "We don't ask you to accept us because we're perfect," he concluded. "We ask you to accept us because we never stopped trying to be better." When he finished, the council turned their attention to Officer Brenner. The man who had once poured gasoline on Marcus's car now stood before beings who could determine the fate of his entire species. Brenner's hands trembled slightly as he began to speak. His voice, uncertain at first, grew stronger with each word. "I've been a police officer for 15 years, he said. "I told myself I was one of the good ones, that I treated everyone the same. But when I saw Agent Webb on that road..." Brenner paused, swallowing hard. I didn't see a person. I saw a category. A label, something I'd been taught to fear and control. The council watched impassively as Brenner continued, recounting the night he and Lewis had assaulted Marcus, the shame he felt now, and what he had learned in the weeks since. I've seen worlds through your records that destroyed themselves with the same hatred I carried, he said, voice breaking. And I've seen what we could become without it. The council chamber fell silent as Officer Brenner finished speaking, tears streaming down his face. I was wrong. About everything. About him, he gestured to Marcus. We humans, we can learn. We can change. I have. Officer Lewis spoke next, his testimony shorter but equally heartfelt. He described growing up in a small town where fear of difference was taught as safety, and how seeing the vastness of the cosmos had changed his perspective forever. When the humans had finished, the 7 council members, beings of light, crystal, and forms beyond easy description, conferred silently. Their communication happened through means invisible to human perception, a sharing of thoughts and impressions that required no words. The tension in the chamber grew as minutes passed without a verdict. Marcus exchanged a glance with Chen, whose expression remained carefully neutral. Finally, the tallest figure moved forward. It resembled a humanoid form composed of interlocking crystal facets that caught and refracted light in hypnotic patterns. When it spoke, its voice sounded like wind through crystal chimes. Agent Webb, you argue humanity deserves a chance despite your treatment. These men who harmed you now stand as your defenders. Is this transformation genuine? Marcus looked at the officers, studying their faces. In that moment, he knew his answer would determine Earth's fate. Before Marcus could answer, alarms blared throughout the chamber. Red lights pulsed along the walls as security barriers began to materialize. Breach in security containment, announced a voice over the station's communication system. All delegates seek shelter immediately. The main doors to the chamber burst open. Voss stood there, somehow freed from custody, wielding a weapon unlike anything the officers had seen before, a cylinder of pulsing energy that hummed with deadly potential. No more talking. Voss shouted, his eyes wild with fervor. No more surrendering Earth's future. He raised the weapon, aiming directly at the crystal being that had addressed Marcus. In that terrible moment, it became clear that Voss intended to shatter any chance of peaceful integration by assassinating the council member. Without hesitation, Lewis and Brenner moved. They lunged forward, placing themselves between the weapon and its intended targets. Brenner shoved Marcus aside while Lewis tackled the crystal being, carefully moving it out of the line of fire. The weapon discharged, a beam of intensely focused energy that caught Brenner across the shoulder and struck Lewis in the back. Both men cried out in pain but maintained their protective positions. Security forces converged on Voss, subduing him within seconds, but the damage was done. The officers lay injured on the chamber floor, their blood, startlingly red against the pearlescent surface, spreading slowly. Medical teams rushed in, some human, others distinctly not. They worked with practiced efficiency, stabilizing the officers with technology far beyond Earth's capabilities. Marcus knelt beside them, gripping their hands. Why? He asked simply. Lewis managed a pained smile. Seemed like the human thing to do. The council members gathered around the fallen officers, observing the scene with their alien senses. They witnessed the pain, the sacrifice, and most importantly, the choice these men had made. Later, as medical teams treated their wounds, the council rendered its verdict. The chamber had been cleared of all but essential personnel. Brenner and Lewis, now stabilized but still recovering, sat in hover chairs near Marcus and Chen. We have observed, began the light being, the worst and best of humanity in recent days. We have seen hatred. We have seen violence. The crystal being stepped forward. But we have also seen growth. We have seen sacrifice. We have seen change. Each council member spoke in turn, assessing different aspects of humanity's readiness for galactic citizenship. When all had spoken, they turned as one to face the humans. Earth is granted Provisional Alliance status, the crystal being announced. And we request Agent Webb as your ambassador. His ability to inspire change in others is most human and most hopeful. Relief washed over Marcus's face. Earth would not be isolated. Humanity would not face its mounting crisis alone. The knowledge, technology, and wisdom of the Coalition would help guide Earth through the challenging centuries ahead. The officers who once sought to harm you and now risked their lives to protect our council have demonstrated the capacity for transformation that gives us hope for your species, continued the light being. They will be remembered in Coalition history. Brenner looked up, surprise evident on his face. What happens to us now? That, Marcus said, is up to you. Return to Earth and resume your old lives with new perspectives. Or, Lewis asked. Join STELR. Chen finished. We need people who understand both the wonder and the danger of what lies ahead. People who have seen both sides. The medical teams finished their work and stepped away. Brenner and Lewis would carry scars from their wounds, but they would heal completely, another gift of Coalition medicine. Marcus looked at the former officers, now part of his new team in ways none of them could have imagined when they first met on that dark roadside. We have much work to do, he said, reaching out his hand. Brenner took it first, then Lewis. 3 humans united by a journey none of them had expected. From hatred to understanding, from fear to hope. Above them, through the transparent dome, the stars glittered like possibilities. Earth's future among them was no longer a distant dream, but a challenging reality about to begin.